My name is Georgie. I am Naturetrek's Tailormade manager. And for those of you who don't know much about our Tailormade department, we are the private bespoke arm of Naturetrek. So if you ever wanted to take a Naturetrek group holiday, but perhaps the dates didn't fit, or you wanted to organise something privately for your family or just as a couple or a group of friends even, then Tailormade can certainly help. We can organise itineraries which are very similar to our group tours, but we can also organise holidays to certain national parks and areas that might not be visited on our group holidays, or even to different countries. So if you've got an idea for a private tour, then please do get in contact with us. There's plenty of ideas on the new Tailormade section of our website. We have a dedicated Naturetrek Tailormade brochure. So if you'd like a copy of that, please do get in contact with our office, or just give us a call. We're always here and happy to discuss your ideas. But that's enough about Tailormade. This evening, I'm going to focus on Australia. So Paul took us on a lovely tour of Tasmania, and I've now been tasked with covering the whole of the rest of Australia. Now, it's going to be far too much to try and cover that in just 20 minutes. So I'm predominantly going to focus on a couple of my favourite tours on the mainland of Australia. But it's also just worth noting that although most of our group holidays are between 10 and 16 days in length, we do appreciate that a lot of people, when they're travelling all that way, would like to go for a bit longer. So we can certainly organise extensions for you. If you just want to spend some time with family or friends, we can just organise for your flights to come back a bit later, or we could organise tailor-made extensions. But we have also, from 2022 onwards, planned all of our Australia holidays so that they can be taken back to back. So if you want to, you can go on one enormous journey covering almost all of Australia and tick everything off in one wonderful trip. So that includes our Southern Australia tour, our Queensland tour, our Tasmania tour, and also our New Zealand tour. So the timings have been coordinated with all of those. But this evening, first of all, I'm going to focus on our Queensland's Rainforest and Great Barrier Reef tour. So that focuses on the two areas that you can see here in red in those circles. So predominantly we'll be up in far north Queensland, up around the Cairns area. And then right at the end of the holiday, we'll fly back down to Brisbane and the Lamington National Park and end the holiday there. So as I said, we will start the holiday in Cairns. Cairns is a lovely town and it's a great place to sort of get to grips with our first Australian wildlife. There's an esplanade that runs sort of all the way along the length of the town. And so we'll be looking here along the tidal flats for pelicans and other waders and water birds. We'll be looking up in the trees for species like this lovely double-eyed fig parrot. This is a real speciality of tropical North Queensland. But Australia in general is often known as the land of the parrots, and we'll see a lot of them during this holiday, and actually on any of our holidays to Australia, parrots are a real highlight. And then on our first full day in Australia, we will head out to the Great Barrier Reef. So this is the world's largest coral reef ecosystem, and it's a lot of people's reason for wanting to come to this part of Australia. So on our first day, we will head out for about 90 minutes on a cruise, and we will end here at Michaelmas Cay. So this is an uninhabited sandy island that's very, very popular and with abundant bird life. So here mainly we can see sort of brown and common noddies. We'll also be looking for lesser and greater frigate birds and possibly even some of these lovely brown boobies. And then after a morning on the island, we will head out onto the reef itself and we'll have our first opportunity to enjoy some snorkeling. So we can get right in here and hopefully see some fantastic things like this green turtle. But for those of you who don't feel comfortable getting in the water and doing snorkeling, there is also the opportunity to enjoy some glass bottom boat tours so you can actually see all the marine life from above. And then on our next day, we'll head out on a second cruise onto the Great Barrier Reef. So this day will work very similarly. We'll have some time on one of the islands and some time snorkeling, but going on 2 different cruises gives us the opportunity to look at species on both the inner and outer reef and really get a better feel for this fantastic ecosystem. We will then head up further north for a couple of hours into the rainforest area, where we'll see habitat like this and this fantastic curtain fig tree, which is a type of strangler fig tree. And the forests here are just teeming with all kinds of different wildlife. We'll see really colourful pigeons, or like doves, sorry, like this wampu fruit dove, which is one of my absolute favourites. It just looks to me like a child has just got a pigeon and coloured it in with Crayola colouring pencils. But we'll also see other strange looking pigeons like this crested pigeon, which is again one of my favourites. We'll be looking for mammals as well. This is actually a musky rat kangaroo. So yes, it is definitely a kangaroo. It is not a rat, but it is the most primitive type of kangaroo that there is. And it can be found in this tropical rainforest area. If we're very lucky, we might see one of these. Speaking of mammals, we'll do quite a lot of spotlighting during our time in the rainforest. We'll be looking for species like this common brush-tailed possum. There's quite a lot of possums that we'll be looking for in this area. We might see green ringtail possum, brown lemuroid possum, and another species which we'll be looking for is this lovely Lumholtz tree kangaroo. So yes, that is right. They do live in trees. They are completely arboreal kangaroos. And this Lumholtz tree kangaroo is very unique to this part of Australia and the Atherton tablelands in particular. So speaking of unique wildlife, this is a Duckbill Platypus, which we will hope to find during the tour. Paul mentioned in Tasmania that they are possible, but it's also possible in much further north in this part of Queensland. We certainly don't see them on every tour, but there are sort of 4 or 5 locations that we will try on the tour, and quite often we will see them, probably more often than not, I would say, but still a bit of luck and some excellent guiding are definitely needed. And so then we'll head out to some of the drier areas. And now this is what I really love about this holiday in particular, is this part of Queensland allows us to explore so many different habitats within just a couple of hours drive of each other. So in the morning, we can be down right on the coast. In the afternoon, we'll be up in the tropical rainforest areas, but we'll also have access to this, these drier areas sort of on the edge of the outback, where we might hope to see species like this Australian bustard, we might hope to see sarus cranes or collared sparrowhawk even. So it really is a very diverse tour. It's not just the birds that we'll be looking for. This is very sort of multi-interest holiday. So we'll also be looking for butterflies, amphibians, reptiles. And this is one of my favourite butterflies. This is the Cairns birdwing. And towards the end of our Queensland holiday, we will spend time in the Daintree, and this is the Daintree Riverview Lodge, which is where we'll be staying. So it's quite simple accommodation, but very comfortable. And as you can see here, it is perfectly situated to look for wildlife. We can just spend time out on the terrace in the mornings and as we come back in the evenings and just wait for the wildlife to come to us. It really is a lovely place. And on one of our mornings in the Daintree, we'll be up early and we will take a river cruise in search of species like this fantastic Estuarine Crocodile. Other water species we might hope to see are lots and lots of different kingfishers. This is an Azure Kingfisher, which is one of my particular favourites. And then in the Daintree rainforest, we will spend quite a bit of time searching for this, which is the southern cassowary, which is one of the real targets of our holiday. So they can grow up to 6 feet tall, and although they are quite elusive, we do have reasonable chances of finding them. There are a couple of sites where we know they're fairly regularly seen. But as you can see here, absolutely fantastic animals, beautiful coloration, fantastic combs. They also have some quite unusual behaviour. It's actually the fathers that look after the chicks. So if you ever see an adult and a chick, it's likely to be the male that's looking after it. And then that ends our time in the far north of Queensland, and we will then fly down to Brisbane and we'll head straight onto the Lamington National Park and O'Reilly's Rainforest Retreat. So Lamington is actually Australia's largest subtract of tropical rainforest. And although we'll spend time in rainforest in far north Queensland, we'll find this area quite a bit cooler, and we'll see some quite different species here as well. So we'll see lots of very obliging species like this lovely king parrot. There are feeders all around the lodge, so most of the wildlife is fairly easy to see and photograph, and yeah, lots of fantastic colourful species like this. This is the Regent Bauer bird, which is sort of the flagship species for O'Reilly's, and something we've got quite a good chance of seeing. We're very unlikely to see the actual Bauers of these birds. There are guides who've worked there for years and years and never seen the Bauers. They're quite temporary, but the birds themselves are generally quite obliging, and we've got a fair chance of seeing these. We'll also have a chance for some different mammals. This is a whiptail wallaby. And a sugar glider as well, which is one of my favourites. So we'll go out spotlighting for these. We're unlikely to see them in daylight like this, but we'll go out looking for the eye shine, and yeah, it's a fantastic part of the tour. So that ends my whistle-stop tour of Queensland. I will now go on to talk about another of my favourite tours, which is our Wildlife of Southern Australia tour. So this is the 2 red circles that you can see here. So for this tour, we'll start in Sydney and explore the area around there and the Blue Mountains. We'll then head down to Melbourne and explore the area around Gippsland, the Great Ocean Road, Lake Mungo National Park. So this is where we'll begin our holiday at the Sydney Botanic Gardens. And I personally think this holiday is a brilliant one for first-time visitors to Australia. Most people want to visit the cities, but even if you don't, it's amazing how much wildlife can be seen in these more populated parts of Australia. Obviously, Australia for a country isn't particularly populated anyway, but it's amazing once you get slightly further away from the people what you can see. But right in the heart of it, we'll see fantastic colourful species like these rainbow lorikeets. These were some of the ones that I really wanted to see during my first visit to Australia. But then you'll find that they are absolutely everywhere, and it's great to get lovely photos like this one. The laughing kookaburra is another species that we're likely to see around the towns and cities. It's actually the largest kingfisher in the world. And a quite flagship species for Australia. And this is a superb fairy wren. I think Paul showed you one in Tasmania as well. But the fairy wrens are one of my favourite Australasian families. What I really love about birding in Australia is that there are just so many families that can't really be found anywhere else in the world. And I think the fairy wrens are a really nice example of that. We'll then head up to the Blue Mountains National Park. So this is part of the Great Dividing Range, which is land formations that formed over 50 million years ago. And as part of that, they give rise to lots of fantastic different habitats. So we've got eucalypt woodland, we've got open forest, we've got heathland, and that in turn supports an amazing diversity of wildlife. Parrots here are really well represented as well. This is a sulphur crested cockatoo, which is again one that we should be able to see fairly easily, but lovely nonetheless. And Paul showed you the 40 spotted pardalote, which is endemic to Tasmania. This is the spotted pardalote, which is one of my very favourites. I just love the fiery colouring of this one, and it's again another one of my favourite Australian families. We'll see lots of mammals here as well. So this is the eastern grey kangaroo. Swamp wallaby, we'll see lots and lots of swamp wallabies throughout this tour. We'll also see red-necked wallabies, and we'll have a chance for common wombats as well. And we'll then fly down to Melbourne. And some members of the group might like to spend a bit of time just exploring Melbourne, but most of us will head down to an area called St Kilda, where we will look out for these little blue or fairy penguins, as they're affectionately known. And they come in each evening into their nighttime roosts and come under the boardwalks. And it's a really lovely way to spend an evening watching them come in. We'll then head straight out to the You Yang Ranges, which offer our best chances to see koala. Koala are almost guaranteed on this tour, and we'll spend some time with researchers who are been looking out for the koalas. They actually realised that koalas have a nose print. Each one is completely unique and identifiable. So it works in quite a similar way to a human fingerprint. And that is now quite a common way of identifying individual koalas. And so we'll learn a lot about their social structures, their interactions, and their biology as well. We'll then continue our journey along the Great Ocean Road, ending at the 12 Apostles here. So this is quite a well-known tourist route, but it's absolutely amazing that the wildlife that can be seen as we travel. And this is one of the species that we'll be looking out for, which is the Saturn bowerbird. So bowerbirds are, again, one of my very favourite families. They're so named for these bowers, which are the straw structure that you can see there, which the males build to attract females as part of quite an elaborate courtship display. So also as part of this, you can see in this picture that it looks like he's selected a particularly rubbish-strewn area to build his bower in. But actually, all of these individual blue items have been carefully collected because the bowerbirds, each individual species has a particular colour scheme that they like to go for, and the Saturn bowerbirds collect blue things, and so they'll create anything they can find which is blue and bring them to their bower to attract the females. Just absolutely fantastic, fascinating behaviour. We'll then head down to Mildura and go across to the Lake Mungo National Park, which is a completely different habitat for anything we've enjoyed before. So it's called Lake Mungo National Park, but actually Lake Mungo itself dried up around 18,000 years ago. So now it's a very dry, arid environment. But it's been continually inhabited by humans for over 50,000 years. And so we'll learn a lot about the Aboriginal cultures that have lived there and how they've interacted with the environments as well. And we'll be looking out for species like this emu, which can be seen in this salt bush here. We'll also look out for wedge-tailed eagle, is another thing. And again, back to the parrots. This is a Mulga Parrot, which is a lovely desert specialist. And we'll look for red kangaroos as well as western grey kangaroos. And I thought I'd include this just to show the type of accommodation that we're likely to stay at. This is fairly typical of all the accommodation that we will use on pretty much all of our Australian tours. So it's all very comfortable, en suite, but quite simple accommodation. But most importantly, it's located in the very best areas for seeing wildlife. For the final part of our tour, we will head to East Gippsland, which is most well known actually as being a dairy farming area. But it's got some fantastic habitats, and we'll spend time in the Buckoon Caves Reserve, where we hope to find species like this short-beaked echidna. So Paul was talking earlier about the short-beaked echidnas in Tasmania, but you might notice that the photos he showed, the echidnas had much longer fur and the spines kind of blended into the fur a bit more, whereas these look a lot more substantial, and that's just regional variation. We'll also be looking for powerful owl, the largest owl in Australia. And we'll be looking for superb lyrebird, which is the largest songbird in the world, actually, made particularly famous by David Attenborough during his Life of Birds series, where he was with a lyrebird that was mimicking a camera shutter. And they're absolutely incredible mimics. They can mimic ambulances and babies, and it's all part of their really elaborate, impressive courtship display. And this is a real target of this area. So that brings us to the end of those two tours, but I couldn't finish off without just briefly mentioning the Northern Territory. So there's some fantastic species that can be found almost exclusively here. We've got pink-eared duck, black-necked stork, fig birds, Gouldian finch, which is one of my absolute favourites, and one of the jewel in the crown, really, of the Northern Territory is Kakadu National Park. So Kakadu actually boast up to a third of all of Australia's bird species. And so for keen birders, we definitely recommend spending time around here. This is the rainbow pitter, which is another species that we might target in the monsoon vine forest here. And finally, it's also just worth mentioning Western Australia. Some fantastic endemic birds, but it's also particularly well known for being the area where one of the world's most impressive wildflower displays can be seen. So there's over 12,000 species that can be found here, up to 60% found nowhere else on Earth. And in the months of September and October, most of these come out into bloom. So again, I don't have time to go into this in great detail, but I just thought I'd show a couple of the fascinating species we might hope to see. So these are tall tail flowers. This is a Slender Banksia, one of many Banksias that we'll see throughout this tour. And this is the Royal Hackia, which grows up between 2 and 3 meters tall. So very impressive and with this gorgeous colours. Whale watching is also incredible in Western Australia. And between June and December, it's possible to see southern right whale, humpback whale, blue whale, and it offers some of the very best whale watching in Australia. So sadly, that takes me to the end of my tour in Australia. There is so much more to say, but we're going to have to leave it there. If you've got any questions, please do pass them through and I'll answer as many as I can. But now I will hand you over to Matt, who will take you on a tour of Papua New Guinea.